Remember, today what we have with large language models is not up to the moment. It's kind of frozen about a year or a year and a half ago, and they're not trained on anything medical. So wait till they get much better pre-training and they are continually updated, which is going to happen.
Hi everyone, I'm Alison Darcy, the founder and president of Wobot Health. Welcome back to the second part of my conversation with Dr. Eric Topol on how AI is transforming healthcare. Dr. Topol is many things: cardiologist, scientist, founder and executive director of Scripps Research Translational Institute. He's also a prolific author, and his 2019 book Deep Medicine outlined the potential for AI in healthcare a full 3 years before ChatGPT grabbed the world's attention. In part one of our talk, we discussed the awesome power of generative AI, along with the opportunities and challenges it presents for medicine. And now we get into what it'll take to realize this potential. You can find both episodes on Wobot Health's blog and YouTube channel. And thank you for tuning in.
I was recently sent, somebody sent me a message that was a screenshot of the front cover of the Daily Mail it was actually from like 1995 or something, pretty late into the 90s, that said, "It's official, the internet is a fad." And like, so I think it's really interesting. I think the way people talk about AI now is the way that people talked about the internet in the 90s. It's the best thing ever. It's, it's so dangerous. And in fact, it's been a tool that has been both of those things. What do you think the media is getting right about LLMs? Like, how do you see that conversation unfolding? Has it been helpful, balanced, unhelpful?
Yeah, it's interesting because there's some that are feeding the pure hype, and some that are feeding this 6-month moratorium, which is never going to happen, and taking a very harsh stance. You don't hear, okay, here's how we're going to take this across the goal line. And that's where we should be putting our efforts, not just, coming up with the design, but also, executing the work, because that's the missing link right now. We got something so powerful, so pluripotent, but you have to prove it. On the clinician side, it has to be very compelling, because a lot of physicians and nurses and pharmacists and all the professionals, they're very leery about this stuff. Not just because they think it's a job threat, which I think most hopefully realize it's not a job threat, but more that, the harm potential is there. Yeah. So we have to have compelling evidence that can come from randomized trials. It can come from really well done, rigorous prospective work. But that's what's needed now, is to, even whatever tool we have to work with, get that compelling evidence base out there so that people start to get comfort in becoming, a new standard of care.
Yeah, that's right. We did a survey a few years ago, just sort of testing the general population, the general public's acceptance of kind of digital therapeutics and the field in general. And we found that people are actually very discerning. So they are definitely optimistic and eager to adopt these tools if there is the evidence to support them. And I think that's a very good thing. Because again, I do worry about the undermining of public confidence where, if you have, where you have a lack of regulation actually, and it creates and you also have a great need, it creates a big vacuum that gets filled with in some cases, just a lot of noise. Everybody's the same claims, everybody's saying the same thing. And over time, in the absence of data, it risks undermining confidence.
And your point is a really important one, because if we have a fiasco because of premature adoption or whatever, it could really hurt the field. It could hurt the progress. It could get stigmatized. So that's why.
That's right.
Hopefully, we all work together to usher this in properly.
And you mentioned in your Nature Medicine piece, you had a sort of call to action for technologists and clinicians to come together and to partner, which is something I really believe in as well. Like, I think as clinicians, we also can't just bury our head in the sand. And also you want to be at the table with the clinicians developing the technologies. Are there folks that you see doing this well right now?
Well, it's just happening so quickly. I think a lot of groups are trying to get first mover advantage. We have a paper in Nature about foundation models in medicine, and we like to think that we're, coming up with really good ideas. The group at Harvard, led by Zach Cohen, is certainly, one of the leading groups in the U.S. But there's other groups like Pierce Keane and his colleagues at Moorfields in the U.K., which are doing some amazing things, starting with the retina, but also widening that out to the whole body, the gateway. And that's a good example of this whole idea of foundation models based on, you start with the retinal photo, and then you basically start to expand understanding a person and their risk for various conditions. So I think what we're seeing is, different groups around the world, those are just a few, that are really very thoughtful, that are waiting to take these tools, which, as you've already pointed out, are just going to keep getting better, to apply them to prove that this is truly transformative, which I believe, if there ever was something that fulfilled that descriptor, this is it.
There's doing the work, and then there's helping people more broadly understand the work in the appropriate context. And I mean, I think you've actually done an incredibly amazing job at that through your writing. Actually, a burning question I have is how you have any time for anything else, but we can leave that to the end of the interview.
So we have to find the ways to get to people so that they are receptive and eager to learn. But we also we just can't be talking in abstract about excitement.
That's right.
We have to actually, in data, in evidence we trust. And that, I think, once we have that, then I think we'll get a lot more receptors open to buy into it.
How important is explainability, do you feel like, in medicine? Or does it depend on intended use, or what are your thoughts?
Yeah, this has been a highly contested topic, as you well know, Ali. And I tend to side a bit more with the computer scientists here. A lot of things in medicine, we have no idea how they work. I mean, like electroconvulsive therapy for very severe depression. Who knows how that works? But we use it, and we use anesthesia we have no idea how these agents actually work, and lots of things in medicine. So how can we hold machines to a different standard if the validation is really solid, compelling, and even if we can't fully explain it? Now, at the same time, we're getting much better to deconstruct models, reverse engineer to find out, the saliency maps and the features that drive their success or their accuracy. So I think we're going to get to a kind of a steady state where hopefully we'll get validation and we'll also get some explainability. But this also carries through to the large language models, because, some people are saying, well, is this really artificial general intelligence? Well, it doesn't really matter what it is. If it's working, if it helps, we'll take it. Yeah.
Given that perspective, I wonder, I know you mentioned it earlier, what do you think about this letter that was written to sort of say we should pause for 6 months? And similarly, I'm thinking about I think the Italian government has implemented a ban.
This is really crazy stuff, because we're not going to have any ban. It's not going to happen. And this is a race now that's, got enormous commercial interests, not just the tech titans between Microsoft and Google, but far bigger than that. And it's also, the fact that it has so much benefit that's incubating. We don't want to suppress that. But we do need to figure out ways to authenticate that is, when you have, the Pope wearing some down jacket, and that's not right, there should be an immediate signal that this is fake. And we haven't done that yet. That is, to basically use AI to determine whether something's genuine. And that's something we have to work on. But no, it's really the idea that we could somehow put this on ice for 6 months or a year indefinitely. It's absurd. It's never going to happen. So, it might sound good to certain people that are worried, and I'm worried too. When you say optimist, it doesn't mean that you have, blind eye towards where you go wrong, right? And so I'm hoping that we'll have efforts to use, the funny thing about AI scientists is they think that every problem with AI solution uses AI, but it doesn't necessarily true. But maybe here, that is what's genuine, what is actually done properly, what is basically fabricated. We've got to have a handle on that.
I absolutely agree. And it was really interesting in the pandemic. One of the lessons for me, at least, was how quickly things can change if you have political will. So what is the role of government here? Is it regulation?
We don't prevent the progress, but we have guardrails. And I think that coming up with that right balance, we haven't done that yet. Even with AI being narrow and unimodal, we still haven't figured out how to exploit the autodidactic function. The algorithms were frozen. The day they get approved, if you could let them loose and just keep getting better and better, but the way we've handled, unimodal AI, like, for example, radiology scans, it's really hurt the power. We've diminished the remarkable power. So we haven't yet found that balance, Ali. That is, we haven't figured out how to do it.
Eroding the model over time ultimately is not in patients' best interest.
Right,
so,
right.
Eric, you must have a front seat here. What's going on? Why haven't we been able to figure out how to regulate sensibly?
Well, yeah, it gives me fits just because we haven't really yet figured out how to derive maximal benefit, and minimize risk. I'm hoping that the lessons we've learned so far with largely images, which has been the sweet spot for medicine now for the last few years, that the shortcomings will not repeat itself. That we will take advantage of that. The more data that goes into models, the more tokens, the better parameters, and also that we acknowledge that this is dynamic. That you can't just approve, a GPTX that day and then not let any further inputs be incorporated. So I do hope that we'll figure this out. Regulatory bodies throughout the world tend to be very conservative, and they are aware of the power, and they are more afraid of it. We have to come up with the right balance, and we haven't gotten there yet.
That's right. I've heard that people argue that it actually comes back to the Hippocratic Oath, that the do no harm has sort of created the environment such that we're so afraid of harm, whereas if the Hippocratic Oath could have been more like do good, it was actually it's more suited for our modern times and modern medicine. And now we're sort of in this place where we're really stuck. Because and it's so I do the overall, I think, position of like the net benefit to the patient is the correct one, but it just seems to we seem to over anchor on this like large fear of any risk whatsoever, whereas the truth is that lots of human delivered services are associated they are all associated with risk because we are humans and humans are human.
I'm so glad you mentioned that. There is a lot of unintended harm that's done in the human to human connects. And so if we were to come up with a new oath, it would be maximize net benefit, because fixating on harm is what holds us back. There is no such thing as any intervention, medication, device, diagnostic test that's 100% foolproof. So acknowledging that, so that we're not stymied and don't hold back from the progress that lies ahead, that's really important.
I totally agree, and it's a balanced approach. It's the only way to move forward with actual balance rather than polarization. Because I feel, I think when you're involved in creating something that is relatively new or uses new technology, if there is sort of one place where it doesn't work in this completely optimized way, it's sort of held up as, aha, you see, there you go. Evidence
Yeah.
of harm.
Exactly.
And it's just so overall, it's so damaging when you look at the overall sort of picture and the overall potential and actually, actual realized benefit as well. May I ask you one more question?
Sure. Sure.
What are you reading right now, and what book should everybody read?
Oh, wow. I just read the GPT-4 book, and that was excellent. And I wrote a review on Substack about that. The one I'm just starting is by a friend of mine, Peter Hotez, on deadly anti-science. I'm a reader fanatic, so I really enjoy all this stuff, and I just never enough time to read all the great books out there.
Eric, it's just been an absolute pleasure to talk to you. I just love hearing your perspective. It's like balm for the soul and the intellect.
Thank you. I thoroughly enjoyed talking to you, Alison. This has been a real joy.
Thank you so much.